So still good morning all, uh, and welcome to a very what we can say the future energy transition group, which is very focused on alternate fuels and the impact of alternate fuels with the economic, social, environmental, which is counted in the figures and the different pathways, different technologies which we use for the production of alternate fuels. And I have a very strong panelist. As a chair of this session, I am Dr. Tushar. I am working as corporate strategy guy in Praj Industries Limited. If we see the panelists, they are from the different fields, and it's very pleasure to welcome all of them on the dais to discuss this very critical topic, which is going to make a energy transition, not only for our country, but also for the globe. And I have with me Mr. Uh, starting from the left, Mr. Puneet. He's a senior manager, business development Chevron, and he's going to talk about the innovation pathways in SAP production. We'd like to welcome you, Puneet. Then we have a life cycle approach which going to access the decarbonization pathways in industries and transport sector, which link to directly the carbons, which is a new subject and emerging subject for the country. And Mr. Georgia from Carbon Reduction Manager of RENA, welcome you, sir. Then clean fuel strategies complementing India's ethanol program by Mr. Vinoj, and he's a board member, Asian Clean Fuel Association. Welcome. Then sustainable aviation fuel again, the FTN cracking, bankable technologies by Akshay, who is from Honeywell. Welcome, Akshay. Then we have carbon credit applicability for ethanol topic, which is going to covered by the Uma Shankar, and he's from Invest India. And finally, not the least, but Mr. Ganesham Deshpande, who is the president of Technology and Engineering, Praj Industries Limited, who is going to give who will navigate us through the role of SAP transforming aviation in the country and globe. And with this, there are to set up a theme of this session. I'll just like to brief you the importance of this one on economy. So if you see the alternate fuels and energy security are parallel things which are moving on across globe. And as a India, we are very proudly says that we are near the 20% ethanol blending. We are launched the SAP. We are in the CBG market. We are in the diesel. So, and coming up with the marine. So all these fuels, if you see the bio-based activity, current economy estimated roughly say $48 billion revenue, creating say 285 lakhs jobs in this sector, and having the I mean it's a population which is going to cross say 1.3 billion now, and we see that the per day consumption of crude, I counted that it's roughly say 1.2 billion barrels per day, and going to be the 3.2 million barrels per day, which is a huge consumption and a high market demand going for the biofuels in alternate fuels for this country. India is focusing, yes, we are the third largest consumer of energy and crude oil. We are the fourth largest refiner, sixth largest importer and exporter also for the petroleum products. So this is the era which we can say the energy transition is going to be happen with the country, and which create the market. If you see the present figures, what Honorable Prime Ministers has announced recently is 1,60,416 crores distributed to the distilleries as a revenue. Then 1,13,000 crores saved as a forex. Then 96,000 roughly crores are given to the farmers as economical benefits. 192 lakh metric ton import of crude is saved, and 578 lakh metric tons CO2 which is reduced. So these numbers says the economic impact of the biofuels on the different pathways which are going to crack in different sectors by applying into the automobile industry. So one is your say rural economy, one is forex, one is automobile, one is health, and one is climate. So all those pillars join together. Today we have a brief discussion going to be happen, and I would like to first welcome on the stage to explain Mr. Puneet to say the innovative pathways to explain. Welcome, Puneet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Patil. I think he set a stage for why sustainable fuel, why SAF, and I mean, apart from the economics and the foreign exchange, the use of crude oil, what is also important is the environment. I mean, I welcome all the people who are from outside Delhi to Delhi with an average AQI of 200, and if we are lucky, it's like 400, right? So that in itself is a very big thing, and why we are talking about sustainable fuels as of now. I don't know how many of you are aware, India is the highest exporter of tallow. So when we talk of feed, one of the feed that can be used for sustainable aviation fuel is tallow. And then in my the previous speakers actually mentioned the abundant supply of biomass in India, right? So if you look, we have a cost, the environment, we have the feedstock which is available. It is all about putting this together and having the production of sustainable aviation fuel, moving forward. And yes, across the world, governments are setting up mandates. India is setting up a mandate for blending the aviation fuel. So all the elements are in. It's just that we need to figure out the technologies which people are working on and take the next step for producing sustainable aviation fuel. Lummus and uh, so so what I would like to say, Lummus, CLG, and Chevron are all committed towards this energy transition, and we are working on various technologies for taking this forward. Now, one of the biggest things which is driving the demand for SAF is also the lack of energy alternatives in the aviation sector. And so when we talk of SAF, we have got multiple feed sources available, but each of these feed sources have their own challenges. Biomass, when we say it as biomass, but if you look at the molecular level, all the sources have different molecules, and you need to have specific processes to treat these molecules to convert them into sustainable aviation fuel. Like the vegetable oils, used cooking oil, tallows, they're basically the triglycerides, and they have their own challenges, especially when you look at triglycerides, they have very high amount of very reactive olefins, high oxygen content, which basically leads to a higher hydrogen consumption in converting them into SAF. Woody biomass is more from cellulose and lignin. And obviously, we all know sugarcane crop, which is alcohol to ethanol. And so we are working on all these fields uh, using CLG and the parent companies to come up with new innovative approaches. Uh, so Lamas and CLG are partnering. Lamas and CLG are working towards supporting the transition. Now, this transition can be in four phases actually. First is the renewable phase. So we have been working on the CLG isoterra and the bioconversion to take the vegetable oils, tallow, and other oils to be converted into SAF. Solid biomass to SAF is under development, and we are working on it. Other important thing is also circularity. When we are talking about biomass, circularity comes into the picture. So we are also working on plastic pyrolysis, tire pyrolysis, waste pyrolysis, using our isoconversion units to convert them into renewable fuels. Lamas is working on ethanol to jet, and the process is well proven. Needless to say, the transition into EV side requires a lot of lithium-ion batteries, and they need graphite. So our CLG's needle coking technology is one of the important technologies for production of synthetic graphite and electrodes. So yes, as a company, we are working on transitions on all the quadrants. CLG has been working on renewables for last 16 years. If you look at the time frame, we started working in 2008, which was when we first developed the BIC technology for treating, basically for making renewable diesel. And as things evolved, we moved into the HEFA stage where we used it for production of SAF. We began marketing Isoterra, which is our HEFA technology, in 2021, and then Chevron acquired REG. So we have the design experience, the catalyst experience, and along comes the operational experience with REG, and that is when we first commissioned our Isoterra unit in Chevron's Al Segundo refinery, and from there on, it's always been new projects coming in. Also, it is important that you have the right catalyst for it. So our partners ART and Grace, we've been working with them to optimize the catalyst and have Endeavor series of catalysts for these processes. Again, so the way it is designed is to maximize the yields of SAF, at the same time reduce the OPEX and the CAPEX and the carbon intensity. Now, the heart of the process basically are the two reactors, the first stage and the second stage. The first stage is more of a HDO reactor along with the guard catalyst and treating catalyst, and the second stage is the isodewaxing catalyst, which is also the isomerization catalyst. So all we are trying to do is, in the first stage, you're trying to maximize the HDO reaction, and in the second stage, we are trying to maximize the isomerization reactions, which at the end of the day yields higher yields of SAF. Now, because of triglycerides, it has its own challenges. We also need to have a sustainable catalyst life and also maximize the yield. So that is where a lot of experience from the catalyst sides comes in. So we've been having multiple units with these catalysts in, and it is based on our Endeavor series of catalysts, which is being used in the refining sector. So there is a lot of expertise which is coming in from there. Okay. So yeah, so the work has been done on these catalysts. So basically, there are 2-3 things which are very important. First is, how do you increase the life of the catalyst? The second being, how do you increase the yields of the catalyst? And also, the test runs, the research, the development that has happened is that we can now get near theoretical conversions of HDO in the first stage reactor. Like I said, these catalysts have already been in various applications across the refining sectors. The isodewaxing catalyst, actually, the 5th generation isodewaxing catalyst won the hydrocarbon processing awards. This is the fundamental catalyst that we use in majority of our loss processes across the world, even in India. So we have majority of our loss production in Group 2, Group 2 plus, and Group 3, dependent on this isodewaxing catalyst. So that is where we are bringing in a lot of expertise into the SAF area as well. Now, refiners don't necessarily need to go on standalone units, right? I mean, to begin with, refiners can start by integrating the different processes in their own refineries to make sustainable aviation fuel. And this is a block flow of a standard refinery that we have. But yes, the first step can be to basically co-process. So we are doing tests, and we are actually working with some of the refiners across the world to do co-processing of feedstock. That can be the vegetable oils, tallows, palm stearin oil in their existing hydrocrackers, hydrotreaters, which is already there. And we got very good results with these refiners. The second stage is converting some of their existing assets. I mean, for example, if you look at the Indian refineries, a lot of people will have some DSGT which are no longer used, or some VGO hydrotreaters which are no longer used. So you can use those assets and convert them into HEFA processes to make sustainable aviation fuel. So the idea is that without investment, because feed is an issue, you need to get the right feed. Feed is an issue across the globe when it comes to sourcing the feed, right? Even though it is evidently available, but sourcing is an issue. So if you have some feeds available, you can revamp these existing units into HEFA and make sustainable aviation fuel. The next comes the FCC, using the feed in FCC to make renewable propylene and gasoline. Last but not the least, then we are talking about circularity. The products from pyrolysis, plastic pyrolysis, pyrolysis treating can go to your standard crackers. They can go to FCC. They can be recycled back into hydrocrackers to make renewable fuels. Last is again needle coke. Needle coke. CLG is a market leader in coking and in making needle coke. So of course, yes, we do forget needle coke, but that is a very important part of the EV transition. Some of the pathways that CLG has been helping the refiners, and recently we are also working in converting some of the mild hydrocrackers to Isoterra. obviously giving all technical support and the state-of-art ART catalyst. Uh, so again, when you look at the standalone units with respect to SAF, you have the lipid feeds, you have the pre-treatment, the main hydroprocessing technology, the hydrogen generation. So the important thing is that if you are making it sustainable, it should also have lower carbon footprint, right? So we are trying to come up with more thermal integrations and integrations of various feeds between these three blocks to have a lower carbon footprint, overall lower carbon footprint for producing SAF, and obviously increasing the yields also. Uh, so this is a very important thing that we need to do when we are talking about having sustainability, even for making the fuels. Uh, so Lamas, like I said, has been a pioneer for ethanol to jet process, and our process is basically divided into four major blocks: the ethanol to ethylene, and I'm very happy to say that we are one of the licensors who has commercial experience for ethanol to ethylene. We have tied up with Braskem, who has the commercial size operating experience for last 10 years in production of ethanol to ethylene. Obviously, the next step is dimerization and oligomerization, which are again standard refining and petrochemical processes, and hydrogenation to make SAF. The idea again is to have a lower carbon footprint, lower capex, lower opex, and obviously optimize the SAF yields. Now, the question is, why stop at SAF? I mean, SAF is one of the important things that we have to make, but then when you're already making bioethylene, there are a lot of petrochemical derivatives that can be made out of that. Once you have the bioethylene, you can convert it into biobutadiens. We have the olefin conversion technology where you have ethylene and butenes combining together to form propylene. So you have biopropylene now. You can polymerize propylene to make polypropylene. So you have polypropylene now. So in fact, Nolan, which is one of our subsidiaries, has a brand, Redeem, which is the biopolyethylene, biopolypropylene series, and we also have, and we can obviously go and make bio SAF as well. So in conclusion, the buck doesn't stop at SAF. Once you have the intermediary bioolefins, you can produce different petrochemicals and make it more sustainable, right? Uh, so in conclusion, renewable fuel and circular products are here to stay. They are going to be an important part of the energy mix of the world moving forward. And there are unique challenges which we see in the feedstocks, and CLG, Lummus, Chevron is all working together on catering to these challenges and making processes which have more SAF and yields and obviously lower carbon footprints. Uh, that's my presentation, and I want to thank IEW for having us here for this important discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Puneet. As question answers will be taken later on if time permits. But see, the isotera catalytic isomerization is what the crucial step you have developed for the lipids, as well as now the green petrochemical concept you have pushed. So just one thought came in the mind while discussing this one: the economic impact of this. Can it be considered with the carbons, right? So definitely this is going to be the global dots connecting theme, sustainable aviation fuel. And for the same, if your group is going to lead for that one to develop, it's a win-win situation for the globe. For, as carbon came in the picture, I'll just like to invite Georgia, a life cycle approach for the same, for these alternate fuels, and just brief your presentation in 15 minutes so that we can have a small discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is Giorgio Bonvicini, and I'm currently Head of Sustainability and Carbon Reduction at RINA. And today I will present a life cycle approach to assess different decarbonization pathways for the industry and transport sector. Let me open briefly the presentation with a short introduction of RINA. RINA is a multinational company acting as engineering consulting company and certification body with headquarters in Italy and 5,800 colleagues in 200 offices in 70 countries, including India. We work in 6 different business units, and specifically I belong to the energy business unit, where we take care of any kind of services related to energy, from oil and gas to renewables, green hydrogen and alternative fuels, always with an eye to environmental impact and sustainability. So today in my presentation, I will briefly start from an introduction to GHG emission and decarbonization needs in the industry and transport sector. I will present a life cycle assessment methodology as a tool to develop and assess decarbonization pathways. I will focus then on two case studies, one focused on heat production in industry and one on transport sector, showing you, before going to the results, the sources of data information that we have used to carry out the analysis, and then I will go to the conclusions. So, starting from the beginning, GHG emission in 2023 reached the record amount of 53 billion tons of CO2 per year. 75.7% of these are due to fuel combustion. Fuel combustion for power generation, for heat production, for industrial uses, for the transport sector. The climate science tells us that we need to act to reduce these GHG emissions, and to achieve the maximum 1.5 degrees global warming, which was set in 2015 as a threshold by the Paris Agreement by the end of this century, we need to cut these emissions by 43% by 2030 and by approximately 90% by 2050. So we need to do a lot, and a lot of effort are being put by worldwide companies and institutions mainly, I would say, to produce renewable electricity, and so to electrify processes requiring energy. But the industrial sectors and the transport sector present some energy uses that are hard to electrify, hard to abate. So that's why we decided to focus in this presentation on fuels and processes in industry and transport activities that still require fuels and are hard to electrify. To assess the decarbonization pathways, we have used the life cycle assessment technique. Life cycle assessment is a technique defined by some ISO standards, ISO 14040, ISO 14044, and is useful when applied to fuels and energy carriers to quantify, compare the environmental impact of the life cycle of the energy carrier, from the production to the transport, distribution, and the combustion, if applicable, to identify the sub-processes within the life cycle of the fuel that are responsible of most of the emissions, so those where we can act to reduce these emissions, to compare fossil and alternative fuels, and to check the alignment with regulatory frameworks like in Europe, the European Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance, for example. Let me mention also that to demonstrate the commitment of companies toward the reduction of GHG emission, companies are quantifying their CO2 emissions, and they divide, according to the GHG protocol, these emissions among Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 emissions are those coming from, basically from combustion of fuels in assets owned by the company. Scope 2 emissions are due to the electricity withdrawn from the grid, and Scope 3 to 15 different categories of emissions, of which, looking at fuels, the upstream emissions. So carrying out a life cycle assessment of a fuel that is then used by a company is a useful tool to provide the company with a real emission factor that can be used for the quantification of Scope 1 emissions and also Scope 3 category 3 emissions, so upstream emission related to the fuel or energy carrier. In this study, we have applied the standard methodology for life cycle assessment, which is articulated in 4 main steps. Goal and scope, okay, understand why you carry out a LCA. Life cycle inventory, which is the core of a life cycle assessment, because here you map all the energy and material flows and emissions occurring in the life cycle of the product you are analyzing. Then life cycle impact assessment, where you use emission factors from recognized databases to quantify the environmental impacts of different categories. And to conclude, the interpretation of results, where you analyze the results and identify potential opportunities for the reduction of of impacts, for optimization, you compare with different alternatives, etc., etc. In this study, we have selected as functional unit for the analysis, respectively, 1 megajoule of thermal energy for the production of heat in the industrial process, and 1 kilometer traveled by car for the transport sector. We have selected this impact assessment method, CML 2001. I will not go into detail on this. And we have selected these 5 indicators to assess different environmental impact. So acidification potential, eutrophication potential, ozone depletion potential, and then the 2 core indicators, global warming potential on a 100-year time horizon, respectively, total amount of CO2 equivalent emissions and only fossil amount of CO2 equivalent emission. It is important to distinguish between the two because only the indicator without the biogenic emissions represents the real impact of the combustion of fuels on climate change. Here in this slide, you can see the fuels and energy carriers that we have studied in this study. Sorry for the repetition. So we have considered conventional fossil fuels like diesel, gasoline, natural gas, and LPG, and alternative fuels, both of biogenic origin, biological origin, like biodiesel and biomethane, and of synthetic origin, like green hydrogen and synthetic methane. And for comparison purposes, we have also evaluated life cycle emissions associated to electricity, both electricity 100% from renewables, PV and wind specifically, and the average electricity from the European electricity grid. For each of these energy carriers, we have collected data on the production process, transport and distribution losses where applicable, emission released during combustion. As you can see, you have also the details on the type of car that we have used to simulate emissions for the transport sector, and for cars also the average fuel consumption in megajoule per kilometer traveled. Now let's go to the results, and we start from the case study on industry. This table contains a lot of numbers and I cannot go into details regarding all of them, but just to show you the overall picture, you can see 1 row for each environmental impact category and 1 column for each fuel or energy carrier that we have considered. We are not checking again in detail all of the values, but as you can see, all of the biological fuels and of the synthetic fuels, have a significantly lower environmental impact for all of them considered environmental impact category than the fossil ones. Now we have a focus on GHG emissions, so on the indicator global warming potential without biogenic GHG emission. As you can see, we have here a chart of better interpretation, I would say. We can see that among the fossil fuels, so looking at diesel, gasoline, LPG, and natural gas is the fuel with the lowest GHG emission, 15% lower than the average of the others. That renewable electricity has the lowest GHG emission per unit of energy, but I have specified renewable electricity because if you take electricity from the grid, here you have the figures from the EU electricity grid, by I imagine it's the same or even higher emission factor if you consider, for example, the Indian electricity mix or the electricity mix of other countries, you have not the same effect. So electrifying an industrial process is not necessarily meaning reducing GHG emission. It depends on how you are producing electricity. On the other hand, biofuels like biomethane and biodiesel have significantly lower GHG emission than the fossil equivalent, 80–90% less. And synthetic methane, the methane produced by methanation of green hydrogen and captured CO2, has a higher GHG emission than biomethane, 4 times higher. But in any case, the GHG emission of synthetic methane are still much lower than conventional natural gas by 75%. So we can see the results in the chart on the right. The same study was carried out with focus on transport. So basically, as I was mentioning earlier, with reference to a functional unit which is 1 kilometer traveled by car. Here in the slide, in this table, you can see the results exactly in the same shape as in the previous one on industry. Again, for all of the environmental impact categories, you can see that bio and synthetic fuels have significantly lower emission than conventional fossil fuels. And then we can go to the chart to present the comparison among different solutions. Here, more or less, we have the same considerations as in the industry case study, but with an additional influence of the different fuel efficiency, energy efficiency of the different engines. So as you can see, electric vehicles are very competitive, especially if charged with renewable electricity. But in general terms, we will say that based on the results of this study, for existing vehicles, the best option is to replace conventional fossil fuels with the corresponding low carbon fuels, like biodiesel for diesel, for example, or biomethane for natural gas. By doing so, you reduce by 75 to 90% the GHG emission per kilometer traveled. And you don't need, in most cases, to make changes to the engine. So you can just fuel your old, let's say, car with a different fuel and decarbonize your transport activity. For new vehicles, instead, if you are able to charge the vehicle with renewable electricity, electric vehicle offer a good opportunity for decarbonization. As you can see, 85% less emission compared to the average between diesel and gasoline, basically. Let me add that, for example, for heavy-duty vehicles like trucks, biodiesel mainly offers a valuable alternative because it's really hard to electrify heavy-duty trucks. So here we have focused on cars, but more heavy vehicles have even more advantages while switching from, for example, from diesel to biodiesel. Going to the conclusions, in this presentation we have shown how the life cycle approach allows it identifying the real environmental impact occurring across the full value chain of fuels and energy carrier in general, and can provide useful and interesting data to companies that are willing to quantify their carbon footprint, their organization carbon footprint, and demonstrate their commitment toward the reduction of GHG emission and the mitigation of climate change. We have seen that electrification has a huge potential for reducing GHG emission, both in the industrial heat production and in vehicles, but only if we manage to produce the electricity we need with renewable energy sources. On the other hand, for energy uses that still need fuels, we can focus on alternative fuels that are available, that are based on, I would say, consolidated and mature technologies, have acceptable cost, and can significantly lower GHG emission. First of all, I would mention bio-based alternatives, which do not require changes in devices and infrastructure, but require significant availability of feedstock, like biomethane and also biodiesel, which are produced by organic waste residues of different types, of course. On the other hand, synthetic fuels are still more expensive, we must admit, but they have slightly higher GHG emission compared to the bio alternatives, but they are based on more widely available feedstock, I would say, because basically green hydrogen is produced from water and renewable electricity, and synthetic methane is produced by green hydrogen and captured CO2. So these are the conclusions of my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention and your participation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Giorgio, for your explanation on the methodology and new parameters actually to be considered for life cycle assessment of the biofuels, which are new for as a country, for India also to learn about that. One addition I like to do, that you also consider the ethanol blended or E100 or E85, what EU norms are saying. So that comparison will be much more beneficial as compared to gasoline and of course, the renewable electricity, if it is going to be there, then the lowest emission. But if we go with the stages of developing countries, we have to go with the all baskets, but in a percentage. So we have to go with the biofuels, then we have to go with synthetic, and then of course the EV is coming in the picture. But if it should be renewable. So thanks for highlighting those things. And with the similar approach with the ethanol industry to grow up and alternate application, I'd like to call Mr. Vinoj, who is the board member of Asian Clean Fuels, and he's going to explain the clean fuel strategies complementing India's ethanol program. So all the best. Thank you.
Good afternoon, namaskar, vanakkam. How are you all doing? Lots of information, one after the other, and I'm trying to do my part to add to that value. So my name is Vinoj Thanumurthy. I work for a company. I'm actually here representing Asian Clean Fuels Association on the topic of clean fuel strategies complementing India's ethanol program. So a short introduction about ACFA. So ACFA is headquartered in Singapore, established in 2000, with the intention of promoting cleaner fuels into the automobile and transportation sector. The ACFA uses principles of science to promote ethers, considering their properties of cleaner burning, easy to the engines, improved fuel efficiency, reducing emissions, and thereby supporting sustainability. So when you're talking about oxyfuels or fuel ethers, what does it mean? Examples include bio-ETBE, MTBE, TAME, and bio-TAE. These are all clean burning, high octane gasoline components that help to improve fuel efficiency, improves fuel engine performance, and because of that, air quality as well. They are fully compatible with other gasoline components. They are easy on vehicles of all types and ages, and you don't need a sophisticated or even a blending infrastructure outside of the refineries. So what has happened over the years is fuel specifications have continued to improve and evolve, with specifications getting more stringent. So you can see tightening of limits in parameters like olefins, aromatics, sulfur, and lower REP. So what it does is it reduces octane. So in order to make up for the octane, you need clean components, and that's where oxyfuels come into play. And the other advantage is it has got an oxygen molecule in its molecular structure. Because of that, it also helps to decarbonize transportation. So let's talk about fuel quality. How do you produce high quality fuel? So you can explain that through a 5-pillar approach. The first pillar is high octane. Higher the octane, it is lesser the knock. Lesser the engine knock, it's better fuel efficiency and better engine performance, and hence lesser emissions. Number 2, REP, low REP. REP is rate vapor pressure. It's the measure for volatility. So low REP means lesser volatility and then hence lesser emissions. You can say that when you reduce REP by 1 psig, it reduces ozone formation by almost 20%. So if you want to address air pollution, the most important thing that you need to address is REP. Third is PMI, particulate mass index. It is related to the amount of aromatics and olefins you have in your gasoline. So you need to have it as low as possible, because low REP, a low PMI is very important. As you know, PM 2.5 is the biggest health hazard for humans. Number 4, oxygenation. Oxygen is good. It helps clean burning. It reduces emissions as well, and toxic emissions. But having said that, it is ideal to keep oxygen content between 2.7 and 3.7%. You can go higher, but ideal is 2.7 to 3.7%. Last but not the least, sulfur, which is probably known to most people. It produces sulfur oxides, it poisons your catalytic converters and emissions, etc. The thing is, you can reduce sulfur in your refinery, but when you do that, there's a capex involvement, and also you reduce the octane, and you need to make up for the octane. So the product we are talking about here, MTBE and bio-ETBE, how does it perform in all these 5 pillars? They have high RON, they have low RVP, they have absolutely no aromatics or olefins in it, they have an oxygen molecule in their molecular structure, and they have low sulfur. It actually ticks all the boxes. In 2023, Terry and ACFA worked together to issue a joint report on the role of oxyfuels in enhancing India's biofuels program. So the key findings are categorized under 3 classifications here. One is energy security and trade. So what happens is bioethers, they have bioethers or MTBE, they have low oxygen content. They also have low RVP, which means you can add more of the ethers for the same oxygen content. That helps you to reduce crude consumption, and thereby your crude imports can reduce as well. ETB or MTBE is produced by treating ethanol or methanol with isobutylene that is produced in the refineries. And India already has an existing capacity of slightly over 500 KTA in their refineries and crackers. Number 2, financial viability. So you can add ETBE or MTBE easily in the refinery. You don't need sophisticated blending infrastructure outside of the refineries, so it's a lower capex. The OPEX is also low because you don't need to add any expensive additives. You can also, most importantly, you can also add C4 and C5, which are high RVP, cheap, but good octane components, which would have otherwise been deselected if you have a component which has a higher RVP. Now, cleaner air and fuel quality. So what you're doing is you are producing the ethers in the refinery, and you're also adding the ethers in the refinery itself. You don't need to have an infrastructure outside. So since you're adding more of the ethers, what it does is it reduces aromatics and olefins, which are the prime contributor for PMI. And because of that, you reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You also reduce other emissions as well, particulate emissions as well. And since they are added in the refinery, the quality that you get in the refinery is what ultimately goes to the pump. You don't need to add any blending outside of the refinery, so the fuel quality is maintained all the way through from the refinery to the customer. So these are some advantages. This is taken from some of the popular newspapers in India. It's regarding the topic of air pollution. So I was feeling a little bit of a throat itch when I came here, and I think I would attribute that to the air pollution or even the PM 2.5. But this problem is not only in India; it is there in many cities in the world too. So here we are just talking about India specifically. So if you look at the major Indian cities, Delhi, Kolkata, and Mumbai, they are in the top 50 most polluted cities in the world. In fact, Delhi and Kolkata find themselves in the top 10, actually. And air pollution is associated with several diseases, including strokes, heart attacks, lung cancer, several forms of pneumonia as well. It takes a huge toll on the economy. Almost $150 billion is what the government spends to attend to the health concerns that comes because of air pollution. Now, transportation pollution is associated with almost 50 to 60% of the air pollution that you see in cities. In particular, almost 60% of PM 2.5, which is the biggest health hazard, is associated with transportation pollution. Now, the good news is air pollution can be addressed, and it has been done successfully in many countries, and I'm hoping to go through that in my future slides. So what we did is we did something called a complex model, which looks into Bharat 6 specifications, and we did an emission study for that based on E5 gasoline, E10 gasoline, a combination of E5 with MTBE and ETBE, and MTBE standalone and ETBE standalone, bio-ETBE standalone. So what you can see from the chart is the RVP is kept the same, but you can see the octane goes up when you go into the co-blends or the standalone ether blends. So you have a lower RVP, you have a higher octane, but your VOCs reduce, your toxics reduce, your NOx reduces. So co-blending ethers with ethanol, because ethanol is the right way to go for India. So co-blending ethanol as bio-ETB with ethanol gives you the option of reducing pollution and still meeting your mandate. In fact, if you had done a model for PM 2.5, which is a moose model, which will also show that PM also drops significantly. So what we are saying is that, especially for urban areas, cities where air pollution tends to be the highest, you can actually consider co-blending MTBE or bio-ETBE along with ethanol, so you still meet your mandate, and you can also address the pollution that you face. So I said about what are the other countries that have managed to address the air pollution by taking some measures. So this is about Mexico. So in 1992, Mexico was in the same boat as India is kind of there today. It was the most polluted city in the world by WHO. It prompted the Mexican authorities to take some actions. I will go through the actions in the next step, in the next slide. But here I just want you to focus on the chart on the left. So what that shows is for 25 years, it has tracked the ozone and the PM10 pollution. And it also shows the vehicle numbers. So the vehicle numbers have almost quadrupled from about 3 million vehicles to almost 13 million vehicles. But what you see is the pollution has dropped continuously, ozone and PM10. And it has seen a reduction in carbon monoxide, ozone, and PM. This is from the government of Mexico website. All right, thank you. So what did Mexico do? So these are the steps that were taken by Mexico. What they did is, as a first step, Pemex is a state-owned oil company. They actually introduced or updated the storage tanks in the three cities, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. And they started focusing on the fuel specifications. First, they brought the oxygen content to 28%, which is equivalent to 12% MTBE. So they started adding MTBE. They reduced the RVP the whole year round because giving more RVP means more pollution. So they made sure the RVP was reduced and it was made the same. There is no summer waiver for RVP. They prohibited the use of methanol and ethanol in the urban areas. They lowered aromatics, olefins, benzene, and sulfur was also reduced at a later stage. And instead of just sticking to the Mexico City, they expanded it to the Valley of Mexico as well. So the result was there to see in the previous slide. So that is how they were able to reduce air pollution, ozone, carbon monoxide, and PM successfully, in spite of the vehicle fleet number going by 4 times. See, we thought of proactively addressing one of the things that people have in their mind, the groundwater contamination history of MTBE in the US. So in the early 90s, the US found almost 30% of their underground storage tanks were leaking, and they were having gasoline in it, and gasoline contains, let's not forget, it's not MTBE, it always contains BTX, benzene, toluene, ethyl benzene, and xylene. If gasoline leaks, I wouldn't be too much worried about MTBE because it's not carcinogenic, but I would be worried about BTX, especially benzene, which causes cancer. So what they did was they addressed the tanks. They made the tanks, improved the technology of the tanks. They had single hull, now they have double hull tanks. They have standardization mechanisms in place, leak detection mechanisms in place, certification, regular monitoring, etc. has happened in the US. So the main point is a tank should not leak. And especially if a tank contains gasoline, it will always have BTX. BTX is always added in any gasoline. So we should make sure that the tanks do not leak. So today, the risk related to underground storage tanks remains minimal because countries have like Europe and China, they all have underground storage tanks which doesn't leak because they improve technologies and they put all these leak prevention mechanisms in place. So I'm coming to the concluding slide, one more slide to go. So what is the recommendation or what's the conclusion here? So what we are saying is India is an ethanol country and that's the right way to go. But what we are saying is consider, along with ethanol, have a co-blend of bio-ETBE, which is made from ethanol, or MTBE, into your gasoline pool. because of the following advantages. One is lower pollution. Number two, it's a complementary source for octane. It's got high octane. It also provides lowered greenhouse gas emissions, and you can increase the domestic yield because you can add more ethers for the same oxygen content. Especially bio-ETB is very relevant for India because bio-ETB is made from ethanol plus isobutylene from the refineries. And it has the following advantages. One, it is produced in the refinery. You can add it in the refinery. Because of that, you don't need capex to build infrastructure outside of the refineries. The RVP is low, so it means you can add cheaper components like C4 and C5, which reduces your OPEX. Improved fuel economy because ethers have the same energy content as gasoline. Because of that, you don't have to worry about lowered energy at the pump. Indian refineries already produce ethers, and because of that, the technology is widely available. So you can actually expand it, or if you want to import, you can import because more than 25 to 28 million tons is produced globally. So you can import or you can produce. And octanes will continue to increase. So this is a complementary source. So you should consider that. So the final recommendation is please consider co-blending ethers because along with ethanol. Ethanol definitely there. Along with that, bioethanol, bio-ETB, because it adds value, it improves efficiency, it increases cost optimization through the entire gasoline supply infrastructure, and it will help India to address its air pollution and emission concerns especially in the urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you, for this different angle of actually to reduce the pollution as well as to revamp the efficiencies with the new trade. If we go with the EBTE and MBTE model with existing infrastructure, definitely it is going to. I'll request you one thing, that if you can make a comparative paper of this one and submit to IEW technology team, then again we'll request oil marketing companies to consider this and go ahead for further evaluation eventually. Thank you very much. Now I'll request Mr. Akshay to present on sustainable aviation fuel with FT and unicracking, which is bankable project proposal from Honeywell.
Thank you, Dr. Tushar, for introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, and thank you, IEW, for the invitation. I would like to express my sincere appreciation for this opportunity to meet and speak with you today. Setting up the context here, as demand for SAF continues to grow, the aviation industry is challenged by limited supplies of traditional SAF feedstocks, primarily driven by heifer root, such as vegetable oils, animal fats, and waste oil. In this presentation, I'm covering how Honeywell EOP-FT unicracking technology can be used to produce sustainable aviation fuel from non-fossil waste sources like biomass, municipal solid waste, biogas, and CO2 combined with hydrogen, helping to make SAF or eSAF that is 90% less carbon intensive than traditional fossil-based jet fuel. Here is the announcement that there may be some forward-looking statements in my presentation, so please be cautious on how you interpret or use such. With respect to agenda, I will briefly touch on the market and the Honeywell EOP pathways to SAF and eSAF, more technical section, which will be followed by an explanation on the FT route, including FT unicracking technology. We'll touch base on the Honeywell EOP FT unicracking experience, and this will be followed by a brief summary and conclusion. Talking about the SAF policy here, government mandates and incentives are important to this space. US typically going for the tax credit approach, DOE targeting 3 billion SAF by 2030. European Union is taking a different approach. They are treating this as a mandate. That means either you have to comply or pay penalties. UE is targeting around 2% SAF in 2025, and that all grows to 70% in 2050. In the rest of the world, there are several other initiatives to produce sustainable aviation fuel, One of them is the Cow Corsia program, which is nothing but to reduce the international aviation to 50% by 2050. In general, demand for aviation fuel is growing. Current production of 30K BPSD SAF to 3.5 MBPSD SAF by 2050. If you see in the near term, the majority of SAF will come from the conversion of the inedible fats, oils, and grease via the HEFA route, uh, where in the medium to long term, as a result of feedstock constraints, SAF will come from upgrading feedstocks that are more abundant like corn, sugarcane, biomass, biogas, or municipal solid waste, where technology routes like gasification, pyrolysis, reforming, fermentation, and possibly even hydrothermal liquefaction. As such,
Good
achieving
morning,
the
ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to third edition of IEW 2025. The show timings for today are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Please take care of your belongings. Thank you.
As such, achieving the industry's low carbon goal will require a mix of different pathways to produce SAF, including the growth of eSAF. Now we look at the segment of eSAF to starting from 2030, as you can see in the charts. We will start seeing a contribution and a rapid ramp up starting from 2035 onwards. Meeting the world's sustainability goals will require multiple technologies to handle various feedstocks. So within Honeywell EOP, we do have a broad portfolio of technology pathways to renewable fuels available, which we continue to expand and optimize. If you look at the EOP portfolio of renewable technology solution, EOP eco-fining technology enables high yields of renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel through inedible feed sources like vegetable oils, animal fats, grease, algal oil. In the co-processing, we can leverage existing assets to create partially renewable products from a blend of fossil and biogenic feedstocks. With RTP technology, you can convert biomass such as forest and crop waste based biostack to RFO for heating purpose and also as a renewable fuels while further hydrotreating. Conversion of CO2 and hydrogen and liquid fuels through EOP e-fining process to produce eSAF. And of course, ethanol to jet fuel represents a new revenue stream for ethanol producer to satisfy the needs for the large and growing aviation market. Today, I want to focus on the FT pathway feed sources such as biomass, municipal solid waste, and CO2 combined with hydrogen to convert these to Fischer-Tropsch liquid and waxes into ASTM-approved SAF. In next few slides, we will look at Honeywell EOP FT unit cracking process, which can be used both for new and retrofit units, which is the latest addition to the renewable fuels technology of Honeywell EOP portfolio. The FT unit cracking pathways for biomass supports various pathways like biomass to liquid, gas to liquid, waste to liquids, or power to liquids by converting Fischer-Tropsch liquid and waxes into ASTM approved SAF. Viable feedstock for FT liquids and waxes includes agriculture or forest waste, municipal solid waste, biogas or landfill gas, and CO2 combined with hydrogen. FT unicracking is expected to significantly contribute to meet the growing demand of SAF as a flexible, highly selective ASTM approved pathway to SAF. It is ready now solution for producing a lower carbon SAF, resulting in a high bankability score. The FT pathways to produce SAF is a three-step process. In the first step, syngas is produced. This syngas is cleaned up and adjusted to appropriate hydrogen to COY ratio and fed to a Fischer-Tropsch unit, which is catalytic process to convert syngas to synthetic crude. Once this crude is produced, after the removal of light sand, this is fed to a downstream FT unicracking process unit, which primarily consists of hydrocracking and isomerization section to produce SAF. And the SAF produced from this FT process is FT-SPK, which is Fischer-Tropsch synthetic paraffinic kerosene. Now, the most salient feature of this pathway are, this is important point here, that why customers are interested in this route, because it is ASTM D7566 approved pathway to produce SAF since 2009, and a highly technological pathway for high technology readiness level. So now from a heat and process integration standpoint, there is also a lot of opportunities. And so process optimization I will cover a bit later, but what I want to highlight here is that uh, looking fundamentally, step 2 and 3, if you see, they are exothermic, while step 1 is endothermic. So this already gives a very clear signal that there is a good opportunity for heat integration to reduce the net energy consumption. The next is high yield of SAF and ESAF, which can be achieved through FT unicracking process. And then from a bankability standpoint, if you see, considering the most technology in this pathway, have a high technology readiness level. So combined with the fact that we at Honeywell EOP can provide end-to-end solution by working with our well-established partners and strategic allies gives a high bankability score. And then finally, if you see, if you have existing hydroprocessing unit, there is a very good opportunity to repurpose existing assets. So now, as we are aware of the overall FT pathways, let us go a bit deeper in the hydroprocessing block itself, for which we have our FT unicracking technology. As we have seen, the synthetic crude from FT unit will be sent to a hydroprocessing unit in the form of a hydrocracker, which is from a complexity point is a straightforward low risk unit, as it operates at a very low pressure, moderate pressure, and is a single stage recycle configuration for which we have our 80 commercial references. And then from a catalytic standpoint, we use commercially proven novel metal catalysts to achieve high selectivity. Quickly, if you stepping towards the process itself, we start with selectively cracking C19 plus hydrocarbons without requiring sulfur and with a minimum amount of hydrogen, which is important considering the price of low carbon intensity hydrogen. After this, we will have a heat recovery step, and another catalytic step to meet the cold flow properties. So what we are doing basically isomerizing the jet fraction here with the high selectivity, again with a low sulfur and with a low hydrogen consumption. And once this SPK containing stream is produced, it will be sent to a fractionator section for separation. The main product will be FT-SPK, while the byproduct will be a small amount of off gas and a naphtha. And then finally, an unconverted C19 plus stream, which will be recycled to get 100% conversion. Now, the reason why we are excited about this technology, because essentially we have managed to develop a process which is able to produce more SAF and with a lower cost and with minimizing the waste as compared to the alternative hydroprocessing solutions, which has also been recognized by one of our customer, DG Fuels. If you look at the key technology differentiators, we achieve around 3 to 5% higher SPK yield due to high SPK selectivity using advanced state-of-art novel metal hydroprocessing and isomerization catalyst, maintaining nearly 100% conversion throughout the cycle, reducing capex by up to 20% through our patented hydrocracker configuration, eliminating the need of amine wash, caustic scrubbing, saltwater stripping, or sulfur recovery unit, and minimizing the waste because there is no need for the continuous DMDS injection. Now, as I mentioned, that increasing the carbon efficiency by process integration is possible, and with that I mean that the tail gas, off gas are not used as a fuel, and there is not a good offtake for naphtha. Recycling these stream back will often make a lot of sense, and the optimization doesn't need to stop there. If in case there is a CO2 being extracted, not sequestered, sending that back to a parallel RWJS unit or POX unit could also be a lucrative configuration. So in FT complex, there is a lot of opportunity to maximize the carbon efficiency. And then the other point I want to make here is that if desired, we can also work with you to maximize modularization of the complex to really squeeze the overall timeline and simplify the execution. And when doing so, we will, of course, certainly leverage our capabilities and experience in the modularization. I just And when talking about the leveraging capabilities and experience, this is also something that we are doing in FT Unicracking. So we started practicing in this particular specific field in 1980s together with the US Department of Energy on characterization and upgradability of FT waxes using hydroprocessing technology. We have processed a lot of different synthetic crudes in our pilot plant, both from Fe and CO based FT process, meaning that we have a lot of pilot data which we have leveraged to develop high fidelity model so that we can give performance guarantee with a very high confidence level. Furthermore, we have references at demo scale units, which we again leverage to improve our models, but also to optimize our catalysts. So we are currently at the fourth generation of hydrocracking and third generation of isomerization catalyst. Uh, uh, by doing so, we continue to honor COP tradition of continuous innovation by continuing to improve our process both from a catalytic and process configuration standpoint. Recently, DigiFuel selected Honeywell's EOP FT unicracking technology for its biofuel manufacturing plant in Louisiana, the largest in the world, making SAF from the FT process that will produce 13,000 barrels of SAF each day when it begins its operation in 2028. Final conclusion and summary, the global push for renewable fuels necessitates a transition towards sustainable feedstocks that can meet the rising SAF demand. At Honeywell EOP, we are reimagining refining to help make a lower carbon future a reality. We have applied our rich history in innovation to the development of our diversified technology portfolio for sustainable aviation fuel, whether applied to more traditional biofuels through our eco-fining, where we have 50 licenses, or those are strictly ethanol-based through ethanol to jet, or biomass, biogas, MSW based through e-fining or FT unicracking. These convergent technology hold real promises when it comes to the next generation sustainable aviation fuel. The right pathway, of course, producing SAF depends on many variables. Talk to us to help you navigate the right pathway to based on your business model and investment strategy. I would like to close my presentation here with an ask to please come and talk to us for we can work with you to help you develop on your projects. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Akshay, for showcasing us the pathways of SAF and ESAF production by summarization and hydrocarbon units allotted to the refineries as well as using the different biomass. And hope that as a country we are going to meet the mandates before our time as a 1%, say roughly 60 crore liters of SAF we required to get it, and hope that similar projects can happen in India with the different pathways which are approved. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to uh, invite on the discussion again on the carbon front with the carbon credit applicability for ethanol, and I'd like Uma Shankar to present from the Invest India.
So I think ahead of lunch, I would like to keep it a bit short and also thank the audience here and the technical team at India Energy Week for inviting someone as young as me to present on these topics. So I think a lot of people here have come to Delhi and have also been around Delhi. It's pretty common to see someone at the back of their car write no farmer, no food. I think the juncture we are at, we can add a few more lines and say no fuel, not enough forex. So there are a lot more of constraints where, as we develop fuel based on agri feedstocks, the dependence on the farmer and the agricultural economy that India has is also increasing. So hopefully, this topic will also help address some of these concerns that the industry has on how sustainably the biofuel industry can work with farmers as well as with the oil and gas companies. So that is sort of the intent for the presentation. So the energy strategy that sort of was thought of in 2018 as part of a biofuel policy was looking at a lot of demand substitution and increasing domestic production, because as a net importing country for a lot of the fossil fuels, we have a sort of dependency that is going to keep growing. Now, to address this, the biofuel policy and the sort of thinking towards biofuel started. And where this is now starting to head towards is that we have a vibrant, strong domestic production of crores of liters of ethanol that feeds into all the vehicles that we take. And how we effectively can see here is that every engine now, if you look at it, you can think of it as it's 80-20. So it's 80 petrol, 20 ethanol. So very clearly the thinking is going to change that every liter of petrol will start having 20% ethanol across the country. Now, given this situation, there is a lot of dependency on certain type of crops and also the farming community as a whole. And what we are trying to sort of identify here is this industry also creates jobs in rural India in terms of agriculture as well as for the ethanol and all the other biofuel production. So it's a twin sort of solution that one creates a certain kind of employment and also a certain kind of industry which satisfies our energy needs overall. Now, going further, what has this achieved though? So, since 2018, if that was the plan, where have we come since then? The government has had quite a bit of success in terms of how they've put almost 15,000 E20 outlets currently in the country, which cater to the higher blending of say 20%. And the goal is almost there, where all the retail outlets would start having E20 fuels coming further. This is, however, something that is directly, as we discussed, leading to the farmer income increase. And that is adding to the goal that even the government has of doubling farmers' income. So there is some actual movement from every liter of petrol we pay for, some of that money is going to actively to some farmers. And then there is a little bit of how agricultural activity is also increasing, because what has happened is the kind of expectation is that a certain yield of crops and a certain value and volume of grain or sugarcane will be available every year, some for food and then also for fuel. So this is increasing our food security, so to speak, where we know that on a 90-10 basis, say from FCI or from some of the other food aggregators or grain aggregators, there is going to be a food security that will be established as a result of this too. Now, another aspect that we really are seeing come out of this, and this is where the climate change mitigation, which I think some of the other colleagues here on the dais have also covered, is that ethanol blending also reduces emissions to some extent, and it has dissolved oxygen. So it really helps sort of how the overall CO2 emissions in the cities and the domestic areas where we live are effectively reduced. Now, coming back to sort of the bottom line, at a country level, if you were to see, uh, if the crude oil markets are fluctuating and are sort of uh, giving us some level of forex exposure, so we'll have to buy crude oil regularly. What we are now starting to see is, because of the ethanol industry, there are some savings. So in the last 10 years, that amount is also quantified by the industry. So what we really hope now to sort of push further is how and what is the cost of all this. So there is also some impact that we are trying to sort of work on, because this story looks pretty good. What can we do to keep this same success story continuing? And that is where we see that in Article 6.2, they cover SAF and biogas and a list of other activities under carbon credits. But even if you use alcohol to jet, the ethanol folks who have started producing, say, in crores of liters of ethanol, don't get the same kind of carbon credit. And globally, however, there is a different practice. So what we are trying to identify here and also have an open discussion about is to understand how the ethanol industry can also deserve some carbon credits. Else, they will start pressurizing, say, the SAF producers and the CBG producers to also give them the carbon credit for the feedstock that they sell to them. So this is sort of the status we are in. So the goals of this sector, as we discussed, there are a few biofuel segments. So there's ethanol, CBG, biodiesel, and SAF. Now, the ethanol sector is basically poised to grow at a certain rate in sort of uh, based on how the petrol demand is also growing. So if the petrol demand is growing at a certain rate, the ethanol demand is also projected by Niti Aayog, and we can see sort of say from where we are at now in 25, 26 all the way up to 26, 27, it starts plateauing somewhere around 1000 to 1100 liters. So this is sort of how these targets are being set, and also the industry is meeting them both in a long-term offtake agreement manner and even for short-term agreements. Now the success story of ethanol now, the folks in biogas, biodiesel want to also join in because they feel that this is the next 5 years of the story. Coming back to the SAF, where we feel that we have had a lot of success on the ground, now we want to have the success in the air too. So for that, we want to see how SAF blending at around 2% can come in with multiple feedstocks. What now starts sort of adding more and more pressure onto the ethanol guys is that they could become preferred feedstock for SAF. The byproducts from ethanol industry become preferred feedstock for biogas. So they are starting to see that. I used to think of it as a distillery that was producing some components. Now it's a biorefinery. So it produces a lot of products for a segment of bio-based industry. And this is where we can sort of also look at the next step on how this ethanol demand itself, what was projected for petrol, say till 25, 26 is around 1000 crore liters. But if we add on these other industries that are going to add in, say with SAF, say for other uses for ethanol, this is where we'll have to see that this industry has a lot more potential and a lot more feedstock demand as a result. This is the situation that we're going to face in terms of how Niti Aayog sees it. And we hope that in the future, with the additional sectors also finding more grounding in terms of SAF and others, this demand for ethanol also picks up. Now, going to the next step, where has this industry actually met this demand? So the demand has been forecasted for petrol. We are starting to see that in 23, 24, for the first time, industry is starting to exceed in its capacity. So it's starting to produce more ethanol, and a lot more distilleries are up to speed in terms of when they will get producing. So this is the success story that we want to also show here, and then highlight how that is actually an effect of pricing. So the price incentives given to the ethanol sector, and there is a constant discussion around it, are also an indicator of a certain new concern that we can have. So basically, molasses that are of from sugar mills and say maize get a little bit of an excess for pricing of the ethanol, which is sort of concern from the sugar industry, who have a bit of concern on sugar pricing and ethanol pricing. What we are really trying to address here is that given this kind of incentive, there is a push to produce more ethanol for the sugar guys, and there is a push to use maize. Now, this is where we are starting to see the first set of challenges that the industry is facing. Because traditionally, if a sugar mill was making sugar and sort of supplying some amount of ethanol, now I'm incentivized to make more and more ethanol. And this challenge is what we are also trying to highlight, that if this push to more and more ethanol comes in, somewhere for the sustainability of the industry, an additional amount of capital has to feed back from the sector to the distillers and to the farmers, because working capital, operating distilleries, those are starting to become challenges. Because on one side, you have signed agreements with OMCs to say, I will sell ethanol, On the other side, you're negotiating contracts with farmers and FCI to buy grain. You have to balance the working capital and how the distillery operates. Otherwise, there will be challenges in this industry to sustain. So the additional sort of support has to come in from, say, carbon credits, or from carbon credits from SAF or from CBG. Then the industry can have some kind of easy way to deal with the short-term capital requirements. They have to take too many short-term loans, then this kind of balancing and price pushes will not be possible forever. That is the thing. The next is sort of who are the industry players who are involved and what are they facing per se. So if you see every year in Delhi, there are times when farmers are agitated or they want higher prices for the commodities. Or across the globe too, there has been a trend of this. So there is a certain need or unmet demand from farmers on higher prices for their goods, be it rice, corn, or sugarcane. And whether to address this, distilleries, at least for the volumes that they buy, can offer better pricing is the question that we also feel would be very good to address with the audience too. Because how distilleries can market not only ethanol, the DDGS from maize-based distilleries, or can they market press mud from sugarcane-based distilleries? Those kind of products increase their sort of working capital and they can pay farmers on time. Now, the industry, on the other hand, is not a very free market based industry. It is still very administered pricing. So, grain pricing is controlled, sugarcane pricing is controlled, ethanol pricing is relatively controlled. So, overall, it's sort of the margin and the sort of play in terms of profitability is fixed. Now, how we can add another component in terms of carbon credit is what we hope will sort of come in. And the other two segments, in terms of how OMCs, oil and gas companies, and auto industry are dealing with this, is they have a few challenges of their own, where on one side, they feel that crude oil prices are of a certain regime. We want to get to 20% ethanol, but can we say that there is going to be some way to balance it so that whenever we blend ethanol, we also get some credit and advantage for it? Because bottom line, what seems to be happening again and again is the crude oil prices and refining operations are growing at an extent, but even they get some leeway only in dealing with the ethanol industry in terms of bidding and pricing, in terms of how much negotiating power they have. So this is where we feel that even for them there is some cushion or buffer that is needed through the launch of, say, a carbon credit system overall. And finally, the auto industry, why they are facing this, we'll discuss sort of briefly these three countries and how they have done it. On one side, the US folks use a RIN system where they are trying to, for every liter of ethanol blended, they give a token which gets recorded by the government, and then the obligation for blending is satisfied, then they agree that it is sort of complied with. In Brazil, they generate a carbon credit, and the carbon credit is traded openly on the Brazilian stock market. And in the EU, the vehicle equipment manufacturers are asked to comply with the government. So you have three regimes globally. In one, the oil and gas companies pay for it. In one, the stock market has a carbon credit that people can buy in and subscribe to. And in EU, the vehicle marketplace for it. Now, I am not the judge of what is the best policy, which is why I also felt just before lunch, if it's okay with you folks, which, say, the US system makes you feel this would work for us, or would the Brazilian system work for us, or would the EU system work for us? This is what we are hoping to sort of also highlight with industry to the ministry. Now, the details of this we'd be happy to discuss in further detail, but one final ask is that if you see the prices finally of sugarcane, and what we really feel is driving this ethanol boom has been the sugarcane industry, is that there is a lot of increase year on year. So this problem is here to stay. The cost of doing agriculture is going up. So we have to find an innovative way to pay back the farmer. Thank you.
Thanks, Umashankar, for bringing out the facts and figures and what should be the fair pricing mechanism for the same grade fuels to get a farm to fuel, waste to wealth concept to be launched and everybody get profit. Now, I would like to request Mr. Ganesham Deshpande, President Technology and Engineering Praj Industries Limited, to explain the navigating towards net zero with the SAP. And I request sir to, as we are in between the lunch and the last session of this last panel as a speaker, I like to enlighten them with the pathways which we can crack that one. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all delegates. Good afternoon, Chairman and my co-panelist here. I know it's the last session, so there is a lot of responsibility on me. Generally, when we talk about biofuels, there's always a debate. You know that, the food versus fuel. I don't see that is happening here. Most of you are still sticking to your chair without going for lunch. That shows, I think, your passion for biofuels. So I will not take your time too much. I will not make my presentation too loaded because that's not going to solve. We have stall in hall 1. So if somebody has a very specific question, either on technology, whatever, any complex question you feel need to be addressed, I would be there, my team would be there. So I will not talk about any chemistry, physics, biology or whatever. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. I know SAF is a very interesting subject, close to our heart. We are listening to the sustainable aviation fuel word, I don't know for how many years now, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Right from the America to India, I think many times we feel it is a buzzword, right? I think SAF, unlike ethanol, already EBP 20 has happened. But when we talk about SAF, biohydrogen, and when we roam around this, even the conference, we see many people talk about, but we are really confused what is really happening across the globe. Why it is not moving forward, why it is still people are talking, and there are many issues, policy matters, LCM counting, so many things around, and many times we get confused about this SAF as a domain. So I think maybe next 10, 15 minutes I will try to make it clear, but again I'm saying if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer post my presentation. Just to give, I think, I don't know how many of you may be knowing Praj, but Praj is an Indian company with a global presence. It's a $400 million kind of a revenue company. The most important, these are only numbers, but most important is we are well equipped with our R&D center where we do a lot of research on biofuels. We have more than 1,000 references across the globe. You name the country except China, we have presence, we have work on multiple local fuels on the local terrain. So with a vast 4 decades of experience, we are public limited company, dividend paying company, and we are passionate about innovation and taking new technologies to the globe, not only to India. When you look at our working, we are working on 2 platforms which are very crucial as far as the whole globe is concerned. One is on the biofuel side. When we talk about biofuels, one first generation ethanol, second generation ethanol, lignocellulose ethanol, you have heard of this. We are also on CBG, compressed biogas, which is also called as the renewable natural gas many times. We are also working on biohydrogen. SAF is very close to our heart, sustainable aviation fuel. Biodiesel, we already developed technology and there are plants. So most of on these technologies, there are plants in commercial scale plants are already in operations. And the other platform we have recently started operating is what we call renewable chemicals and materials. It's not only the fuels which are going to matter a lot going forward, but it's also renewable chemicals and materials, and where I know, I think most of us, we are also struggling with the problem of plastic, right? Though plastic is part of our life, it has also become, it has so engraved in our life, it has really, that microplastic has created issues, health issues and so on and so forth. So we have a pilot plant set up in Pune, near Pune, where we are producing polylactic acid, which is a bioplastic, which is not a today's topic, but when you look at the overall platform where we are working on both biofuels as well as the bioplastics. And obviously at the center, you can see our focus is on definitely feedstock, technology and product. So unless we really look at the end-to-end kind of a solution under one roof, it doesn't give you clear solution which would be viable and reliable. This is known matrix. I think this is not something I think you don't have to break your head. When we talk about SAP, I'm only talking in perspective of SAP. One would require a market demand for your product, and obviously when somebody say when SAP is a hard to abate industry, where is the question of demand and supply, right? I think demand is already there. There's no other way you can really decarbonize, defossilize this industry other than using this liquid, high density liquid fuel, which is called as sustainable aviation fuel. So that is given. Then when it comes to technology, right? My co-panelists talk about multiple pathways. And when you look at ASTM, 2 years back when I was going through, there were 5 pathways, 7 pathways, and now there are almost more than 10 pathways which are already registered under ASTM, what they call D7566, right? All these pathways are already there. And I'm sure going forward, there will be many more pathways which will emerge out. And all these pathways are looking at multiple feedstock, which is HEPA is starting, which is nothing but the fatty oils, tallows, and so on and so forth. Then suddenly we realize there is nothing like used cook oil, especially when we talk of India. We always say there is used cook oil which is available, but personally I have not seen used cook oil anywhere. It goes through and ultimately ends up in our stomach. I think that's what we have been observed. So it will all been said that this is available, but that's not available. So what's the option which is left out? And we have realized, I think, only the biomass would be the fuel which is available abundantly on this earth, especially in India. When we talk about this biomass, and these numbers could vary, don't go with the exact number, but we talk about 180 million tons of surplus residual biomass is available in India. It could be 150, it could be 200, number is not important. The important is that since we have such a good sunshine, we have so much of agri residue which is available. If you put to use, especially for this kind of advanced biofuel, our job would be done. So that's another part which we will be talking about. And last but not the least, what is important is the policy. I think what is lacking today is the policy support probably. We are not clear, even including the US, there are a lot of incentives being talked about, but there's no clarity on who will be the beneficiary of the incentives. That Inflation Reduction Act in USA, you take Europe, I think that was being referred here. India, we are talking about 1% blending by 2027, 3%, 5% blending by 2030. Unless there is a long-term policy interventions clearly defined, and these are unfortunately high capex industry. It is not the small capex industry. So any producer, any investor, he would like to have assurance, long-term assurance. He wants to really invest. And that's the point which I would like to talk as a part of the summary. I don't want to really jump. Some of the numbers are available. I don't want to repeat these numbers here. This, which has already been published by ICAO, India's International Civil Aviation Organization. But you can see the demand, there's a huge demand going forward. And as long-term, their aspirations, they already defined by 2050. Most of the airlines, they want to go to net zero emissions. And if that has to happen, almost 450 billion gallons of SAF would be required by 2050. And where we are today, when we look at today's number, we have not even crossed millions, 500 millions of liters of SAF. What does it mean? I think huge is a really target which we are talking about in the next 25 years. But my only point is that it is doable. It is not that it is not doable, though we are at a very minuscule level today. With all those technologies is emerging out, there are so many technology players. They are having a lot of R&D being developed. I think going forward, this target is definitely achievable. And again, I'm repeating here, if you want to really decarbonize, you can see today almost 1.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide is emitted today, and going forward by 2050, it is going to almost double at 3 billion tons, which is a huge amount of carbon dioxide is going to be released in the atmosphere if you don't really use the sustainable aviation fuel. Now coming back to India, because today's session is specifically to India, our demand is also going to be there. Even if we talk about 1% blend, it would be requirement of 15 crore liter of SAF, 15 crore liter. For every 1% blend would require 15 crore liters of this. So when we talk about around 5% blend, it is 70. It's not a really very large amount we are talking about. And we are abundant of feedstock today available for production of SAP. Now I just talk about 10 pathways. I don't want to repeat these, but one of the critical pathway which is highlighted here, which is of our interest today, is ATJ, this alcohol to J. Now alcohol could be ethanol, it could be isobutanol, because we are also working on both the molecules. Ethanol is available today abundantly, isobutanol is under development, and I'm sure going forward it also will be a part of this pathway. So ethanol, isobutanol, even isopropanol, C5 alcohols would also be part of this game plan going forward. So we'll only focus today, we'll restrict ourselves to ATJ pathway, which is being predominantly talked about. And when you look at this, as India, we have at a really distinctive advantage over global players. There are two pathways which are combining together for SAP production. I think you must already realize this. The first step is basically converting biomass, any agricultural residue or agricultural feedstock, into what we call as oxygenating fuel. One of the co-panelists referred as oxygenating fuel. Oxygenating fuel is fuel which is oxygen, which is nothing but ethanol or butanol, etc. In the second step, the first time which is happening in the industry, the two industries, one is coming from the biocatalytic route or bioprocessing route, and another is coming from the chemical catalysis route, what we call as the oil and gas industry specifically. They are now coming together, they are actually partnering together to produce the final product which we call as renewable hydrocarbons. It could be SAF, it could be green diesel, it could be all those kind of gasoline, isooctane, you name it. So if you want to produce renewable hydrocarbons, this kind of partnership is very, very critical going forward. So it is not going to be only biocatalysis going to help, it is not only the chemical catalysis would help. Unless these two things come together and then produce the final product, we can really convert all agricultural feedstocks into renewable hydrocarbons. About this technology, again, I was specifically avoided writing chemistry here. I don't want to really chew your brain before lunch. But it's a very simple technology. When you look at this, when you take any oxygenating molecule, the first job what you have to do is you have to knock out the oxygen. Oxygen has no role to play when you talk about hydrocarbons, right? So first thing what we do, we knock out the hydrogen. Unfortunately, when you knock out hydrogen in the first step, you also take out oxygen in the first step, you also take out hydrogen, which is not desired. So in the first step, we convert very stable molecule ethanol into ethylene, which is reactive molecule, and then ethylene without oxygen, we have what we call as addition reaction, which is also referred as oligomerization reaction in the second step, and then we convert C2 carbon molecule into C8 to C12, which is nothing but our what we call as sustainable aviation fuel. In the last step, the hydrogen which is removed in the first step has been added back. So it is basically the point is that it is a very simple three-step process, which is called as a dehydration where you remove oxygen, oligomerization where you add the molecule to make it C8, C12 carbon molecule, and you add back again hydrogen, which is again a minuscule quantity, to make it alkanes or what we call it hydrocarbons or saturated basically alkanes. I think these are the things. So paraffins, alkenes are converted to alkanes. So these are very simple three-step process. It looks simple, but is a little bit complex when it comes to when we call it chemistry or kinetics of the reaction. The question is, do India have a feedstock for production of SAF? Here you can see a tall blue graph here. India has potential to almost produce 4,000 liters, crores liters of ethanol. When all the feedstocks today, when you look at the left-hand side, we have surplus of molasses or sugary feedstock, we have surplus of starchy feedstock, we have surplus of say lignocellulosic feedstock. When you look at this surplus feedstock which is available and you convert into ethanol, India has potential to produce 4,000 crore liters of ethanol almost on annualized basis. And today how much we are consuming for blending into petrol, it is close to 1,900, 800, 900 crore liters. So the rest which is available can be utilized for SAF production. These are simple numbers. Sugars can give you, I think this is not very critical here. The only parameter there is the carbon intensity, which is very critical for SAF. Carbon intensity is defined as how much of carbon dioxide you have emitted per unit of energy you have utilized from the ethanol, which can be defined in terms of gram equivalent of CO2 per megajoule of any fuel. So that number is very, very critical for SAF, and that is where your technology would play a very important role. Now here is typical carbon cycle. My co-panelists also talk about carbon intensity, GHG. There are many terminologies being used as a life cycle analysis. Sometimes it is being used as a GHG emission, how much GHG saving is done, greenhouse gas emission saving is, that is compared to the baseline of gasoline or diesel or whatever respective fuel we are comparing for. So here you can see very clearly, when you take it as a SAF, which is coming ATJ, this is the aviation turbine fuel coming from the fossils, you can clearly almost have more than 55 to 60% GHG saving, or your carbon intensity without even carbon capture and utilization, it can be achieved because of the advantage of the waste which is coming from the agricultural side. So India has a very definitive advantage when it comes to SAF production, because SAF, especially CORSIA, which is a carbon offsetting and reduction mechanism which has been defined, they demand minimum 10% reduction in the GHG, which is minuscule, it is not very high, as compared to the baseline emission of the fossil fuel. Whereas any feedstock you take, which is if you take coming from the agricultural origin, it has a potential to save at least minimum 55 to 60% GHG emissions. Yeah. So here is again this is another curiosity. Many times people are concerned about what's the cost of production, including the cost of capex for typical
Good
SAF.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to third edition of IEW 2025. The show timings for today are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Please take care of your belongings. Thank you.
So here, when you look at the cost of raw material, cost of conversion, cost of capital, typically it is not more than $2 a liter or 150 rupees a liter. That's kind of, so if you add your additional whatever, it's a break-even cost, I would say. When you look at the IRR, internal rate of return, etc., even 200, 250 rupees per liter, if it is allowed and it's given, the project becomes viable. So the another question is that, is it viable to have SAF produced in India? Yes, it would be viable. Definitely there is a policy assurance from the government side. So what we are doing, I will not run through. Another question is being asked, where is the technology? Where really, there is hardly any technology which is on the ground, right? Everyone talks about this and there are references, this technology is being talked on the paper, but here is the, sorry, here is the case where we have actually integrated all those 4 unit operations which I talk about in our laboratory at R&D center as a pilot scale. So here you can feed alcohol at one end and you can get SAF at the other end. So far these technologies were not integrated by any technology player. The first time it is happening in India, probably in Asia, where we are all integrated all these technologies at one place, both process-wise and energy-wise. And now this plant is available. You can visit our R&D center in Pune, and you can see actually how the plant looks like when we talk about ATJ pathway. These already, I think you have seen, you have heard, you actually know this, that we have flown an aircraft on commercial from Pune to Delhi using this SAF, which was produced in our R&D center. This has been certified under ASTM, DGC, and all those kind of approvals we got it. So it is not something new. The most important critical point I would like to highlight quickly is that we are in partnership with Axens, and we are trying to bring best of both the worlds today. Axens, which is a European company, they are there for, I don't know, many hundreds of years. They are doing the same thing for many, many years. This is not something new to them. Alcohol, we are doing it for last 4 decades, and we know how to really configure ethanol, alcohol, for use into SAF, because all said and done, it is a catalytic process, is very sensitive to chloride, sulfur. There are many, I don't know to again go into the technicalities of this. But Praj on this side, the front end side, on the biocatalytic side, we know how to condition feedstock to make it suitable for treatment into the catalytic process. And Axens, they have multiple plants which are already in operations, unit operations globally, and they know how to really produce SAF. And what is important is selectivity, yield of SAF, which will bring you more profitability, and all those numbers are. So it's integration of both the, I would say, advantage of both the worlds. Both the giants are coming together to really deliver this product to you. Yeah, so you can see here references from SAP or from Accents about the SAP. There are umpteen number of references are available. It is not something new to us. So well, technology is well proven. You can visit our pilot plant and you yourself get satisfied with this. I don't want to go through the challenges. Always for any new technology, there will be few challenges. But I think we should not bother about these challenges. As a function of time, this will one by one this would disappear going forward. Some support would definitely be required because this is at the initial stage. We can talk a lot about this, but we always believe the technology should or the commercialization should happen without any support from the government at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for a detailed technical presentation and opportunities as well as challenges for this sector. As a Praj Industries, we know that it look as an engineering technology player, and with the conclusion, I like to say that the different pathways, different capabilities, agriculture to farm, waste to wealth, with new molecules or refining concept, uh, with the different opportunities in India, with carbon trading and life cycle assessment. This is going to be the fruitful inputs for the as a country to build the new roadmap for the aviation fuel as well as different biofuels. With this, I would like to thank the panelists for contributing to this valuable session with your insights, starting from Deshpande sir, Rama, Akshay, Vinod, Georgia, and Puneet, and I myself, Dr. Tushar, to conclude this session with the remarks that the era is changing and transition is going to be happen very fruitful for the country as well as for the globe. Thank you very much.